Welcome to Conspiracist. Today we're undertaking a deep dive into a persistent and frankly intriguing hypothesis. The idea that governments have intentionally concealed evidence of paranormal government programs. We've got a collection of information here covering quite a bit of ground historical government interest, claims of disinformation, manipulation, right through to skepticism and government transparency efforts. Our mission, as always, is to objectively evaluate the reasoning and the information in these sources. No humor, no dismissiveness, just, unpacking it. Okay, let's get started.
Right. Well, what strikes me immediately is that this isn't, a new thing. Government interest in the paranormal seems to go way back. Our sources suggest that after World War II, U.S. military intelligence was actively looking for Nazi documents.
Really? Nazi documents on what?
On things related to Das Unerbe, apparently this group explored extrasensory perception, ESP, and psychokinesis, mind over matter stuff.
Wow, okay. That definitely sets a different kind of stage post-war. So it wasn't just about rockets and scientists, but potentially psychic abilities.
It seems so. And this reportedly kicked off this idea of a psychic arms race with the Soviet Union.
Ah, the Cold War context. Makes sense. Fear and competition driving even into these stranger territories.
Exactly. This concern really seems to have ramped up in the 1970s. There was this belief, apparently quite strong, that the Soviets were pouring significant resources into psychotronic research.
Psychotronic? What exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, the term referred to the supposed ability to influence thoughts, maybe emotions, or even physical states from a distance, using psychological means or maybe even electronic ones.
Okay, influencing minds from afar. That would definitely worry intelligence agencies.
Precisely. And that perception seems to be what spurred U.S. intelligence to launch its own programs. One of the key early ones mentioned is SCANIT. Stands for Scan by Coordinate.
Scan by coordinates. So trying to psychically see a location just by knowing its map coordinates?
That seems to be the implication, yes. This wasn't just idle curiosity. It looks like there was a perceived strategic need.
Which leads us, I suppose, pretty directly to the big one. Project Stargate.
Project Stargate, yes. The sources describe it as a secret U.S. Army unit, officially set up in 1977. Its main goal was looking into psychic phenomena for military and domestic intelligence uses.
And it wasn't the first, right? You mentioned SCANIT.
Right. Stargate was more of a consolidation, really. It pulled together several earlier, smaller projects that had these, very evocative code names. Things like Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Project CF, Sunstreak.
Gondola Wish, Grill Flame. Any idea what those actually were? The names are certainly memorable.
Unfortunately, the sources don't really detail the specifics of each of those or why they chose those names, just that they existed before being folded into Stargate around 1991.
Okay, so within Stargate and these predecessors, what were they actually doing?
A core technique was something called remote viewing.
Remote viewing. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
It's described as trying to get information about a place or maybe an event that's distant or hidden, using only the mind. Extrasensory perception, essentially, not using your normal senses.
And did they think it worked?
Well, the proponents, people involved with Stargate, claimed pretty high accuracy rates, often over the 65% mark that clients supposedly required.
65%, that's
right.
Specific? Do we know how they measured that? Or if it was verified independently?
That's a good question. The sources state the claim, the 65%, but they don't really go into the methodology behind calculating it or detail any external validation. So we have the claim, but not much context for it.
Right. And didn't the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, play a role early on?
Yes. SRI comes up in the 1970s research. They were testing people who claim to have psychic abilities. Uri Geller is probably the most famous name associated with that phase.
The spoon bender.
That's the one. Initially, it seems the Department of Defense was interested in SRI's work, but then there was a report, a crucial one, that basically called Uri Geller a complete fraud.
Ouch. That must have consequences.
It did. Apparently, the researchers involved lost their government contract after that assessment. It really highlights the difficulty, even early on, of separating potential phenomena from, performance or deception.
Which neatly brings us to this whole other dimension, potential government disinformation, especially aimed at the UFO community.
Yes, this is where things get even more tangled, perhaps. Our sources mention a documentary, Mirage Men. It suggests the U.S. government wasn't just passively observing the UFO scene, but actively creating hoaxes within it.
Hoaxes? Like faking sightings?
Or maybe feeding false information. The documentary points to a figure named Richard Doty. He's described as a professional disinformer.
A professional disinformer. What did he claim?
Doty reportedly said that a huge chunk, some sources say maybe 80% of the information fed to the UFO community was deliberately false, made up.
80%. Why?
Right.
What would be the point of such a massive deception?
The alleged goal was, quote, to muddy the waters, to create so much noise and confusion that anyone seriously investigating UFOs would just look, well, foolish or unreliable.
So discrediting the whole field.
That seems to be the implication. One tactic mentioned was leaking stories to the media that UFOs were just covers for secret military aircraft. Advanced tech.
Okay.
But the theory proposed by Mirage Men is that the real goal might have been the opposite, using the UFO topic itself as a cover for something else they didn't want people looking at.
It's layers upon layers of potential deception. Does this connect to the Paul Bennewitz case? He often comes up in these discussions.
Yes. His case is presented as a possible example. Bennewitz was apparently monitoring activity near a military base, Kirtland Air Force Base, I believe. He thought it was picking up signals related to UFOs. The Mirage Men narrative suggests he became a target, that counterintelligence deliberately fed him false, elaborate stories about aliens and UFOs.
To distract him.
Exactly, to distract him from whatever classified real activities might have been happening at the base that he was perhaps inadvertently detecting. Throw him off the scent, essentially.
So the UFO disinformation wasn't necessarily because they were hiding aliens?
It might not have been, no.
But maybe hiding advanced aircraft or other military secrets. And UFOs were a convenient smokescreen.
That's one interpretation presented in the sources, yes.
Yeah.
And it goes even further.
How so?
It's suggested that these operations might have had another purpose, studying how the public, or at least specific communities like UFO researchers, react to disinformation campaigns.
Using them as a test bed for information control techniques.
That's the disturbing implication raised. Less about hiding flying saucers, perhaps, and more about learning how to manipulate belief and manage information.
Okay, these are some pretty complex and potentially dark claims about government actions. But we need to balance this with a skeptical viewpoint, which our sources also cover.
Absolutely. Scientific skepticism is crucial here. Skeptics raise very fundamental points about paranormal claims in general. The big one is repeatability. Paranormal experiments are often criticized for not being consistently repeatable under controlled conditions.
And the lack of a solid scientific method behind many claims.
Precisely. There's a demand for rigorous methodology, which is often seen as lacking in paranormal research.
And history does provide some cautionary tales about belief versus reality, right? Hoaxes and misinterpretations.
Definitely. The famous surgeon's photo of the Loch Ness Monster is a classic example, widely believed for decades.
Until it turned out to be a model stuck on a toy submarine.
Exactly. And then you have historical events like the Salem witch trials in 1692, a tragic example of mass hysteria and false accusations driven by belief in the supernatural with devastating consequences.
So vigilance against deception and misinterpretation is key. Are there organizations focused on this?
Yes. The Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, CSI, is mentioned. They dedicate themselves to scientifically investigating paranormal claims and exposing fraud.
And James Randi, he was a major figure in skepticism.
He was. Randi, a magician himself, spent much of his career debunking psychics and paranormal claims. His $1 million challenge is famous, offering that prize money to anyone who could prove paranormal abilities under strict, mutually agreed-upon scientific testing conditions.
And was the prize ever claimed?
According to our sources, no. It remained unclaimed for years, which skeptics often point to as significant.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. If governments were involved in these programs, how might information eventually come out? Let's talk about transparency and declassification.
Right. The U.S. government does have processes for declassifying information. The automatic declassification program is mentioned. The goal is to make older classified national security information public after a certain time while still protecting sensitive stuff.
And has this process actually released anything relevant to paranormal studies or UFOs?
It seems so. Searches of government archives, like science.gov, apparently turn up declassified documents related to UFO studies. Things like reports from Project Blue Book, that was the Air Force's UFO investigation project back in the 50s and 60s.
Right, Blue Book.
And also CIA records about their own involvement in studying UFOs, reportedly spanning from 1947 up to 1990.
So documents exist. Does anything explain why things might have been kept secret beyond just hiding proof of the paranormal?
Well, there's an interesting angle mentioned in a CIA document abstract. It suggests that during the Cold War, there was a very real national security concern. Not about aliens, necessarily.
But about the Soviets.
Yes. The concern was that the Soviet Union could potentially exploit UFO reports, real or faked, to cause mass panic and hysteria in the U.S., undermine stability.
Psychological warfare, using the UFO phenomenon itself.
Exactly. So controlling information about UFOs might have been seen as a necessary measure for national security in that Cold War context, regardless of what they thought UFOs actually were.
That adds another layer of complexity to the cover-up idea. It wasn't necessarily about hiding little green men.
It might have been driven by those broader geopolitical fears.
What about more recent developments? Has anything official come out lately?
Yes, our sources mention a recent Pentagon report. It's described as a pretty thorough review, looking back at classified U.S. government programs since 1945.
And what did this comprehensive review find?
It stated pretty clearly that it found no evidence of extraterrestrial activity, and, importantly, no evidence of any efforts to hide information about ETs from Congress or the public.
No evidence of ETs or cover-ups in this official review, but didn't it mention a specific program proposal, something called Kona Blue?
It did. Kona Blue was apparently a proposal put forward to the Department of Homeland Security sometime in the 2010s. The idea was to set up a program specifically to reverse engineer any extraterrestrial craft that might be recovered.
So planning for the possibility.
Planning, yes. But according to the report, the proposal was ultimately rejected by DHS leadership.
Why?
Primarily because there was no substantiated evidence to support the premise. They stated that no non-terrestrial craft were ever actually recovered to even start such a program.
Interesting. So a proposal existed, but it wasn't approved and seemingly wasn't based on actual recovered tech. What do current experts, people who've looked at the data, say?
Yeah.
Like Joshua Semeter, who's on that NASA UFO panel.
Semeter and others like him really emphasize sticking to the evidence. He stresses that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence.
Testimony isn't enough. Eyewitness accounts.
He argues that while testimonies are data points, they're not sufficient on their own. You need corroborating physical evidence. His observation, as presented in the sources, is that often the most extraordinary claims lack solid proof. And when there is solid proof, the explanation usually turns out to be something, well, more conventional.
That brings us to the study of the paranormal itself. Does anyone try to study this scientifically, even if it's outside the mainstream?
Yes, absolutely. While mainstream science is often hesitant issues with measurements, repeatability, there are researchers who identify as parapsychologists. These individuals often have PhDs, our sources note, and they do try to apply scientific methods to study things like ESP or psychokinesis.
But they face challenges.
Big challenges, yes. Getting funding is difficult. Gaining acceptance in the wider scientific community is tough, mainly because the phenomena they study are so hard to pin down reliably and measurably.
I see. And what about studies looking at people who believe in the paranormal? Is there research on that?
There is. Our sources mention a systematic review of studies that looked at links between paranormal beliefs and cognitive function, how people think.
And what did that review find?
It indicated that a significant number of studies suggest some kind of association between holding strong paranormal beliefs and potentially poor performance on certain cognitive tasks.
Poor cognitive performance. Why would that be?
The review notes the reasons aren't fully understood yet. It could be related to different thinking styles, maybe biases in reasoning. It's still being investigated. But the review also highlighted problems in the research itself, things like small sample sizes in some studies, or the possibility that studies finding a link are more likely to get published than those that don't. So it's complex.
Definitely complex.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered a lot: historical programs, disinformation claims, skepticism, recent reports. Bringing it all together, what can we say about this core hypothesis, intentional government concealment of paranormal government programs?
Well, it's clear the picture isn't simple. There's evidence, or at least strong indications, of historical government interest in paranormal phenomena, particularly for intelligence applications like with Stargate. Whether those programs yielded anything genuinely paranormal or effective is much more debatable.
And the disinformation part.
The claims are certainly there, backed by some accounts like those in Mirage Men. The motives seem potentially mixed, maybe covering up sensitive tech, maybe Cold War paranoia, maybe even testing manipulation tactics. It's hard to definitively prove the extent or primary purpose from the outside.
But what about hard proof of ongoing programs or a cover-up of, say, alien visitors?
That's where the evidence seems weakest, according to our sources. Anecdotes abound, but verifiable, repeatable scientific proof for the underlying paranormal phenomena is largely missing. Skepticism remains a very strong counterpoint. And recent official reviews, like the Pentagon report, explicitly state they found no evidence of hidden extraterrestrial activity.
So while transparency has brought some historical documents to light,
Yes, documents related to past UFO studies and CIA interests are declassified. But the big questions about whether these paranormal programs were real in the sense of accessing genuine psychic powers and whether there's an ongoing cover-up of something extraordinary, those remain very much open to debate and require much more scrutiny. The evidence presented in our sources just doesn't provide a conclusive yes.
a complex picture indeed, with pieces pointing in different directions. Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.